In a market seemingly flooded with specialty e-bikes, everything from fat tires and folders to commuters and city bikes, sometimes you just need a bike that can do a little bit of everything, and that's exactly where the Ride1Up Turris comes in. It's got a little bit of versatility, lots of practicality, and it comes in at just $1,195. I've been putting it through its paces for the past few weeks, and I've got some thoughts on where it shines and where it might fall short for you, so stick around and let's take a deep dive on the Ride1Up Turris. So the Ride1Up Turris is a class 3 e-bike, so you get speeds up to 28 miles an hour on pedal assist, and using the throttle, speeds up to 20 miles an hour. Now the bike is UL 2271 certified, and Ride1Up says this is a touring bike. Touring to me just means it can do a little bit of everything. It's versatile, it can carry gear, it can go pavement, it can go off-road, it can go city commuting, it can do a little bit of it all, kind of that SUV style bike. That's a term they throw around quite a bit. Now, they say this bike weighs 54 pounds. I threw it up on the scale and it came out to about 61. Now that's with the battery. I took the battery out and the bike came down to about 53 pounds. So the battery was right around 8 pounds there. Now this comes in two frame configurations. Here we have the XR version, which is essentially meaning their top tube is going to be higher, more of a high step version. This top tube's at about 30 inches. And this fits riders from about 5'6" up to 6'4". Now, if that's too tall for you or you're on the shorter side of that, they do have the ST version, which will have a lower top tube and easier access on and off the bike. Now, that one will fit riders from 5'1" up to 6'2". So you've got a pretty good range from 5'1" all the way up to 6'4". Now, for colors, this is the graphite gray. It's got a nice kind of a matte, sleek gray look to it. But if you don't like that, they also have a matte green, which is called their forest green, kind of a dark hunter green. And then they finally have a third color, which is an off-white, which they call their cream color. So between the two frame configurations and the three sizes, there should be something there for everybody. Specific geo numbers for this frame: this top tube here at its lowest point, standover height is 30 inches. The seat post starts at about 32 inches, and you can adjust it all the way up to 43 inches. So you've got a massive 11 inches in the seat post here. And then up top, you've got a 14-inch reach. Wheelbase, front hub to rear hub, is about 43 inches, and the max payload on this is 300 pounds. So 200-pound rider, you still have room for another 100 pounds of gear to take with you, which is really solid payload for a bike of this class. Now, when it comes to wheels and tires, they did go with a 27 5-inch alloy wheel, and they wrapped it in a Kenda Boost K1227 tire. It's kind of a nice all-terrain, almost like a light XC tire. It's got a nice gum wall, or the tan side walls. I think they look really nice on bikes these days. And all in all, they have good grip, good traction, and more importantly, they're very quiet, even on paved surfaces. Despite having light knobbies on them, they roll really well, and Kenda makes good tires. Now, when it comes to fenders, they did include fenders both front and back. Now, these are alloy fenders with some alloy stays to kind of keep them in place. And on the rear fender, you do have integrated lighting that acts as your tail light. Now, I'd love to see plastic fenders on here. They're going to be lighter, they're going to not rust, and they're not going to bend. If you bump your bike into something like an alloy one could, and alloy tends to make a little bit more noise on the road. But I did find that these were generally very quiet, so long as you tighten up all the stay areas and just make sure that you leave out any wiggle rooms. They do a good job. Now, when it comes to lighting, they did include a front headlight rated for 60 lux and a rear tail light with no listed rating, but all in all, they do a good job of helping you be seen when you're out riding, whether that's daylight or nighttime. Even at nighttime, the light is sufficient for getting around, although it's not super bright. It is good enough for just riding around, commuting, even in low light situations. Now, when it comes to the rear hub motor, we do have 750 watts on the back end that puts out 90 Newton meters of torque. Now, it's got 5 levels of pedal assist 1 through 5, 1 being the minimum, 5 being the maximum, and they kind of incrementally get more powerful as you go through. I found this motor driving it all week, commuting with it, to and from work, driving it on some trails, riding it downtown. I got a good feel for the bike, and I do feel like this 750 watts is a really good balance, especially with 90 Newton meters of torque for a bike in this 55-ish, 60-pound range. This isn't a fat tire at 80, 90 pounds, so that 750 plus 90 Newton meters of torque is a really efficient motor that does a good job moving this confidently, and you never feel like you need more power out of this bike. In fact, sometimes I thought it was pretty punchy and pretty powerful, so it's just a good balance for this bike. Now, this motor is activated through a cadence sensor, which essentially means when you start spinning those pedals, creating a cadence with your pedaling, that's going to tell the motor to kick on. And when you stop, ultimately it'll tell you to kick off. But Ride1Up uses some proprietary clever programming they call R1CBC, or Ride1Up's current-based cadence system. And that essentially is just some programming that makes this feel a little less like a cadence sensor and a little more like a torque sensor, ultimately just giving you a more natural pedaling feel by kind of dynamically changing that power output just a little bit. Now, when it comes to the battery, there is a 48-volt battery that does have 14 amp hours, giving you 672 watt hours. Now, you can also secure this in the frame or out of the frame for off-the-bike charging or security, and I'll show you how that works now. So the bike does come with a key, actually two keys. You'll put it in the key slot here on the left side. You see it drop when I turn the key, and then there's still a lever you'll just pull up, and that will allow you to just remove the battery altogether if the bike doesn't fall on me here. Now, this battery is UL 2271 certified, and when it comes to range, they say this will get between 30 and 50 miles. So I did throw that on some real world testing, and I found that this bike, when I went with minimum pedal assist, so on the minimum assistance level, PAS1, I was able to get 52 miles. Now, when I cranked it all the way up to PAS5 and really just went all out full bore for as much as the battery could take, I still was able to get 21 miles on a single charge. So for me, 21 to 52, it's very close to their estimated 30 to 50. Now, it's also got a 1-year warranty. So all in all, between the UL 2271 certification and the 1-year warranty and locking it on the frame, this battery has performed well, including the range test. All right, so when it comes to the drivetrain, we've got a 7-speed setup here. Specifically in the rear, we've got a 7-speed Shimano Altus rear derailleur, and it's mated to a Shimano Hyperglide 11 to 36 tooth cassette. Now up front, that is a 46 tooth chainring. It's got a nice double-sided chain guard on it with 170 millimeter alloy cranks and some Welgo flat aluminum pedals that do have a couple raised studs and reflectors for some visibility. Now, when it comes to braking, it's handled by LBN hydraulic disc brakes. Now, these have 2-piston calipers and 180 millimeter rotors, both front and back, with a thickness of 1.8 millimeters. Now, in my time with the bike, shifting and stopping has all been very sufficient, as you would expect. I never had any issues with dropping chains or hunting gears. It was always crisp and to the point, and the brakes always stopped confidently whenever I asked them to. Now, when it comes to the saddle up here, this is the KNUS or KNUS Ergo Gel Comfort Saddle. This is probably one of my favorite features of the bike. This gel saddle, it's a little bit wider than normal. Other than that, it looks, kind of uneventful, but really this is a super comfortable saddle. Plus, with the big wide 2.4-inch tires and the front suspension fork, it's just an ultimately very comfortable ride. Now, up front, we do have a 100 millimeters of travel in the front suspension fork. That has a lockout feature. If you just flip that switch at the top of the stanchion, it will lock out, and to bring it back, you can depress that again. Now, on the left side at the top of crown, you also have preload adjustment, so you can kind of fine tune that spring a little bit just to kind of get that reaction you want when you hit a bump. Now, up here we do have a true mountain bike stem. It's like a 45 millimeter with a 31.8 millimeter bite. And that leads us to these 50 millimeter riser bars, and it's an alloy handlebar. Now, on both sides, we do have ergonomic lock-on grips, and on both ends, we also have alloy brake levers from LBN that also have motor cutoffs, as you would expect on an e-bike. Now, on this right side, we do have the Shimano 7-speed over-the-bar shifter, and on the left side, we have the push throttle and the Ride1Up display. Finally, we have the cable management. All the cables coming off of all the controls up top are routed into these kind of cable stays and then ultimately down into the frame, with the exception of the hydraulic brake line for the front and the power light wire there. So let's now go take a closer look at this Ride1Up display. All right, so this is the home screen of the Ride1Up display, and there is no app, so everything you're gonna handle on the Turris is right here through the display. So on the home screen here, on the top left, we've got a battery bar that's indicated by 5 bars, each about 20% of the battery's life. The top right is going to be your current PAS level, which as I kind of go up and down, you'll see those go. And in the center, we have our speed. And then this says odometer, and down here it says basically 48 miles. We have done resetting on this display while we were doing our testing. But you can cycle through different data screens on the bottom by just tapping the power button. Now, if you hold it, it's going to turn the bike off. But if you just tap it, you can see we'll get the trip meter. Tap it again, you get the time since I turned it on. Tap it again, you're at the power output. So like as you're pedaling, the power wattage you're requesting will kind of display there real time dynamically. And then you're back to your odometer. Now, if you want to go in walk mode and kind of walk with the bike, you'll simply just hold this power down, or excuse me, PAS minus button. I'll do it for a second, but the bike will literally start to go, so I'm only gonna do it for a second. But you saw that little footprint there pop up on the screen and tell you that the bike is in walk mode. Now, if you want to turn on the headlight, you'll just hold the plus button, and that brightens the screen, and you get the headlight indicator. And then the same thing, just to turn that off, you'll just hold it down and it goes away. Now, if you want to access some advanced settings or tweak some, there's a couple things on the back end you can mess with. You're going to hold the plus and minus button at the same time, and that takes you to these kind of coded sub-menus. Now, you'll want to get the manual and see what each of these means. I won't go through each of them because there's several, but just know that to get to these advanced settings, you'll simply hold that plus and minus, and then you'll need to reference the manual for whatever specific little code here you're going to be messing with is. But I'll just back out of that. If I don't break anything, there we go. And that takes you out of the home screen. Hold the power button and that removes you out of those advanced settings. And then that really is the nutshell, all the bells and whistles you can mess with here on the Ride1Up display. All right, friends, out here on the Turris. So when you get on this bike, the riding position, because of its riser handlebar here, but it's still got a wide stance, you've got a nice kind of upright position with good handling. The wider your arms are outwards, away from the center, the more kind of leverage you get on your handlebars and steering. And with the 69-degree head tube angle this bike has, and these 50 mil riser wide bars, it just makes for a very kind of, it's really like kind of just lean the way you want to go. It kind of is intuitively playful, which is kind of nice. The riding position's very upright and comfortable. This saddle is super comfortable. It's a little wider than others, but it's not so wide that it looks like a cruiser bike saddle. It's just a little bit wider in general, and it just gives a really comfortable ride. Plus you have these ergonomic lock-on grips, front suspension fork, and you have the 2.4 inch wide Kenda tires. With 2.4 inches, you're talking a lot of volume in those tires, so you can actually air down just a hair and get even more road dampening and vibrations to kind of get soaked up. But I'd say the way it sits with just a typical 30-35 PSI on these tires, not only are they silent, they have no road noise despite the knobby tread pattern, but they just aid to the overall comfort of the bike. So we're riding in PAS 3 right now. And at PAS 3, I hear a little bit of motor. It's very not noticeable. I kind of have to listen for it. It's even less if I'm in PAS 1 or 2. And if I go up to PAS 5, I can hear a little bit of motor hum as it winds up to speed there. Once I get past this gentleman, we'll talk about some throttles and speeds too. On your left. All right. So I found that PAS 2 is a really good cruising around. PAS 3 if you want to cruise around a little bit quicker. But the one thing that stands out about this motor is not just how quiet it is, it's really powerful. So not all 750s are created equal, 750 watt motors. Just like most things are not created equal, they all have just different personalities and characteristics. And the personality and characteristics of this motor would be quiet and peppy. It's a really good mix for this bike that's got this SUV kind of DNA, the do-it-all kind of bike that you can do anything from city commuting to just going out on the weekend and exploring, even on dirt roads. I mean, it's really kind of a jack of all trades. But let's talk about speeds with this. So we got a nice flat stretch with nobody on it. I'm gonna get past this bend in the road and do a little throttle check. Now it's a class 3 bike, so we'll have throttle up to 20 miles an hour, and then we'll have pedal assist up to 28, and we'll do both of those. So PAS 5, 3, 2, 1. So kind of a slow start, and it's quickly getting up to speed. We're at 10, 12, 15, 17, 18, 19, and there it is, 20 miles an hour. Now at 20, I'm gonna go ahead and see how long it takes to get to 28. So there we go, we're cruising at 28 miles an hour right now. I'm gonna slow down. So one thing I noticed that is a standout here is pedaling at 28 miles an hour. I still have good feedback in my pedals from the gear range. You're not ghost pedaling, you're not spinning your legs like you're on a circus bike. The gearing is very sufficient for this bike's speed. So the brakes are LBN, which is a good brand, and they're hydraulic disc brakes with 180 millimeter rotors with 2-piston calipers. Nothing super special about them, but they do work well every time I've asked them to. Let's just do a stop from 20 miles an hour. All right, 3, 2, 1. So aside from hearing the rotor noise of just the calipers rubbing the rotors, stopping power was really solid. No issues there. Not a ton of modulation or super high-end feel to the brakes, but definitely good stopping power and just a straightforward design that it's kind of a workhorse. 2-piston calipers, 180 millimeter rotors. It's kind of the standard these days for most bikes. So this bike has a cadence sensor. Now at first glance, cadence sensors, you think, well, that's a cheaper option, and it is. It's technically it's literally a cheaper option. But what Ride1Up has kind of been known for, there's 2 brands that do this that I know do it well. One is Electric and one is Ride1Up, which we're on. And they use different systems that they built themselves. But essentially they're programming these cadence sensors to take a look at other factors besides just the cadence sensor, like how much amperage is being sent to the motor. And essentially they're able to program these cadence sensors to dynamically change their power, much like a torque sensor would, based on how you're riding. So what that ultimately ends up feeling like, you have a bike that has a torque sensor when in fact it has a cadence sensor. They've just gotten very creative with the programming and it just feels good. It's a good like meet in the middle balance of not increasing the price of the bike, but still improving the feel of the bike, which is a nice setup. That's one of the nice things about software and programming, is you can make changes like that don't require changing hardware. Let's cross this. So the Turris is actually a bike that when people find out what I do, they ask, oh, what do you do for a living? Or, and you tell them, almost everybody says, well, what's the best e-bike? And that's such a loaded question. There's no really best e-bike. It really depends on what kind of riding you're doing, where you're going, how big you are, how far you want to go. All those factors really matter to figure out the best for a person. But when somebody doesn't know what they want, they just want a bike that can do a little bit of everything. This is one of several different bikes that I will usually recommend as a starting point to go check out. The Ride1Up Turris is just, guys, $1195, class 3 speeds, UL 2271 safety certified battery, Kenda Tires, Shimano drivetrain, LBN brakes. It's just a good value for money, and it's a bike that can do a little bit of everything. So whether you're a daily commuter or you want to just go explore on the weekends, this is kind of the bike to get it done. Let's go take it to Ben and talk to him about it from a mechanic standpoint, and we'll kind of wrap this whole review up. All right, guys, we are here with Ben, our in-house shop mechanic who has a lot of time working on bikes, and he shares his thoughts of what he likes about each bike that we bring in and some areas that he would improve on each bike. And Ben, I'm gonna let you do your thing and get out of your way, but I wanna say thank you to Feedback Sports for providing us not only with their racks, but some of their tools. If you guys like to work on your bikes, especially if you're in the need of a bike rack, Feedback Sports makes some really nice racks, and they even have some e-bike specific ones too. So with that said, Ben, go ahead and take it away. Just start off with what you like about this bike.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. This bike's an easy one to spot some really cool parts on. As far as a mechanic and things to like about it, at the price, it's really great to see hydraulic brakes on this bike. Why is that? Hydraulic brakes are always going to be easier to pull. They're going to have more power at the brake surface. And then there's less of a problem on comparing to mechanical brakes where they've got a cable and a housing, which sometimes becomes contaminated or rusty or hard to pull. I don't mention it that much in reviews, but to see hydraulic brakes on this bike, I think that's a real big plus. I will always highlight the aluminum pedals when you get them on bikes like this. So maybe it's not going to crash, or the rider's not going to crash very often, or crash that hard rather, but if the bike's being transported or it tips over somehow, aluminum pedals are just going to last a lot longer. They won't break, they won't crack. So love seeing that kind of stuff on here. Some people like it, some people don't. I like seeing a 7-speed drivetrain on bikes like this. I like that because 7-speed freewheels, 7-speed chains always have more steel. And for a rider and a consumer, what that's going to mean is It's not going to wear out as quickly. It's not going to need to be replaced as frequently. So 7 speeds, nice and simple, a lot of steel, great wear. I love seeing that sort of thing. These are kind of a small thing, but I do like the grips because they're a 2-bolt lock-on style rather than some all rubber grips or a grip with only 1 bolt. So they tend to throttle a little bit. So 2 bolts, good to go. Grips are going to stay solid. The last thing I'll mention is that it has a real mountain bike stem on it. Why do I like that? I like that for a couple of reasons. One, some of the e-bikes that we'll see come through here are adjustable, meaning they've got a pivot or a hinge that you can raise or lower the stem, and all that does is it just gets a little flexy and feels wobbly, and then for sure that just means there's more nuts and bolts that potentially come loose. So a real mountain bike stem, you can find them at every bike shop. You can get longer ones, some with more rise, etc. Just a nice piece, keeps it simple.
Nice, man. What kind of things would you improve on a bike like the Turris?
With this one, it kind of comes down to ergonomics, and I'll start with the shifter. I'm not a big fan of the choice of any e-bike company to use an on top of the handlebar thumb shifter. Mechanically it works okay, but gosh, it sure is awkward to get your thumb clear to the top there to figure out how to shift when you're riding a bike, even if you're going fast or through traffic. It's just not as easy to use. So I think an under the bar rapid fire style shifter might be a little nicer. Maybe even a grip style shifter, something like that would be something to consider. I would like if they would consider a 2-piece aluminum chainring. These 1-piece stamped steel versions of chainrings, they can bend, they do wear out quicker. You've got an e-bike, you're riding this thing, there's a lot of torque on the drivetrain. You just, with an aluminum 2-piece sprocket, it will last longer. Weight's not really a matter, but it just comes down to longevity, I think. So that would be nice to see. And then also, with a bike like this, I know it's not the most expensive bike out there, but I'll always recommend the consideration of a hollow, oversized bottom bracket spindle. You get a bigger rider, you get somebody that's a little bit more aggressive, something of that nature, and you're just going to feel a lot more stability in the crank and bottom bracket area. If you get an oversized bottom bracket spindle, it's just one of those things. I guess lastly on this one, it looks like it's a tapered head tube or steer tube, and what that means to you guys is a tapered steer tube, which is the fork part here. This is 1.1 inch diameter at the top. Looks like it's 1.5 inches at the bottom. When bikes have a tapered steer tube or head tube rather, that they're a lot stiffer on the front end. It's a point and shoot sort of thing. There's no flex. I always feel like it's a little misleading when a frame looks like it's tapered, but if you look underneath this fork, it's a true 1 1/8 from bottom to top. So is somebody going to notice a difference? Probably not, but if you're going to make it look that way, you probably should just make it that way. I would just, it's a little thing for me to harp on, but it's one that I see, and I will call that out. But otherwise, man, great bike for the money.
Nice, Ben. Once again, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, guys, so there you have it, the Ride1Up Turris. As you can see, quite a bit going on for a really low price point of just $11.95. We've got name brand components like Kenda, Shimano, and LBN. It handled everything I threw at it this week with pretty much handled really well and never gave me any compromises, left me feeling like I wanted a little bit more or less out of the bike. I think all in all, if you're looking for a bike that can do a little bit of everything and is super comfortable to ride, and right around that $1,000 price point, the Ride1Up Turris here should definitely be worth a look, or at least just make it onto your list of considerations. Now, if I missed anything about this bike that you want to know about, just drop a comment down below. I do my best to respond to everybody. And while you're here, like and subscribe. And until the next review, I will see you guys out on the trail.